Welcome back to the Akita Life. My name is Tony, and with me as always is Haga, the American Akita. And in this video, we are going to be talking about resource guarding, what it is, and how to stop it in your Akita. So let's get into it. If you're not familiar with resource guarding, this is where a dog will become very defensive around anything they consider a resource. So for some dogs, that might be toys. For other dogs, that's usually food, and it can also be things like their bed, which is a little less common, but basically any high value item to your dog, they might get defensive over it. And typically what you'll see is if your dog is playing with a toy, it'll be very aggressive towards other dogs. If the other dogs want to play with that toy, or if your dog's eating and you go to approach your dog, they might growl or even nip at you. And obviously this isn't an ideal behavior. I think it's important to understand why resource guarding is even a behavior with dogs in the first place. If you think about when dogs are born, they're usually born in litters from anywhere to 2 to maybe up to a dozen or even more puppies. It depends on the breed. Akita litters do tend to err on the smaller side, but there was about 10 puppies, I think, in Haga's litter, for example. And you have all these puppies and they are fighting with one another to get to their mother's milk. You'll see them climbing on top of each other, pushing each other out of the way, trying to get to that milk. So from a very young age, they are conditioned to kind of fight for what they want. And also they might get pushed off of that teat when they're feeding, and that's gonna make that defensive behavior kick in. They're learning from a very young age that this is a valuable resource. There's not enough to go around for everybody, so you have to defend what's yours. If you think about dogs in the wild prior to them being domesticated, obviously they would be pack animals, and the pack would take down maybe a deer or something similar, and there wasn't always enough meat to go around, right? If you look at like wolves today, they are efficient hunters, but they still have to work very hard to catch even a single prey, like a single elk or something similar. And so there might not always be enough food to go around, even though all of the animals in the pack had to work very hard to get that resource. So that, resource guarding is somewhat naturally programmed into a dog's brain. And the more of a primitive, if you will, and I know some people don't like that term, type of breed that you have, like an Akita, the more chances you are going to have that resource guarding behavior pop up. It's really important that you stop resource guarding before it happens. So it's much easier to take some steps to prevent it from becoming an issue with your dog, rather than having it be an issue and then having to kind of reverse or overcome that already developed bad habit. And if you're in the situation where you're adopting a more mature Akita, you might not have an option. So we're going to address that as well. But here are some tips to really get your puppy off on the right foot, or maybe I should say right paw. So the first tip that I have is hand feeding your Akita during feeding times. And this has so many great benefits to it, not just stopping resource guarding from becoming an issue. Basically, this is a very simple concept. Most of us, when we think of feeding our dogs, we think of taking a scoop of their kibble or opening up a can of their wet food, plopping it into their dish and saying, hey, have at it. The dog chows it down and then goes and does this. But honestly, you build a much better relationship and connection and communication with your dog if you hand feed them. So essentially what we do is we just take a cup full of kibble, the full serving that we're going to give Haga, and we give it to him in small pieces. We kind of ration it out and we make him work for the food. So we use this as a training session. So you can work on any number of skills, whether it be, sitting, heeling, coming, recall, or you can just pick one or maybe 2 things to work on for that single session. And you don't necessarily have to do the whole serving of food. You can maybe do half of it and then give them the second half as a more, complete serving. But basically what this does is it somewhat disassociates like feeding time from other activities. So they're so preoccupied with doing what you're asking them to do that they don't develop that really severe connection with, oh my gosh, here's this huge resource, this gold mine of food, I have to protect it at all costs. Plus, they are engaging and disengaging with the food because they're moving through a series of different activities. And it's just a good time to just bond with your dog and have some fun and play around with them. So it's really an enjoyable thing, but I honestly recommend doing this at least one meal a day. Obviously, time constraints are there. It can be difficult to do this for every single meal, especially with a large breed like an Akita, where you might be feeding them 3 to 5 times per day. But if you can do it at least once a day, that is a great place to start. And the sooner you do this, the younger you do this, the more of an impact this is going to have on your Akita. Okay, the second tip I have for you to stop resource guarding is to interrupt and interact with your Akita while they are feeding. And this is also very straightforward, and you would need to do this when you weren't hand feeding your Akita. So in the instances where you are just putting the food into the bowl and putting it on the floor while they are eating, practice stepping in there, taking the bowl away for a couple minutes, playing with them a little bit, and then go putting the bowl back on the floor, letting them continue to eat. Or it could be something as simple as while they're eating, make sure that you're giving them lots of love, lots of attention, lots of rubs, telling them, you know, they're doing a good job, be very positive. And again, this is getting your Akita used to someone being around, interacting with them, touching them while they are feeding. And with my last dog, he was an Akita mix. We adopted him, and he had a little bit of resource guarding issues. Nothing major. He wasn't like super scary when you went to go near him, but you could tell he didn't like it. And through gradually just touching him, being near him, he started to calm down, realize like, okay, this is all right. I can be drinking some water, I can be eating some food or playing with a toy, and someone can come near me. It's not a big deal. Not everyone who approaches me is a threat. And that's really the behavior that you're trying to teach, right? That it's okay to let others around you while you're in this vulnerable position, you're not paying attention fully to what's going on, and you have this resource here that is very important to you. So I found that very helpful with my last dog, who already had a little bit of resource guarding, and that's something we worked a lot with Haga, was taking his food away while he was eating, giving it back to him, touching him quite a lot while he was eating. And we've had no issues with him resource guarding whatsoever. And I think it's because we worked so diligently on it when he was a puppy. Okay, the third tip that I have for you is making your Akita wait for the break command before they are allowed to eat. So this is something that we worked diligently with on Haga, and he's actually very good at it. It's probably his best skill. But basically, if we tell him, he will wait until we give him the break command before he will go to eat. And this has obviously a ton of great benefits to it. If there's something on the floor that you don't want your dog to eat, a great example was I just brought him to the vet this past week, and there was some looked like a little bit of throw up from another dog on the floor. And of course he wanted to go right over and smell and probably lick it up. And I said, made him wait. And then I was able to, tell someone, hey, you got to come clean this up. So it has a lot of other value to it other than just helping with resource guarding. But I think, having your Akita wait and to get that command to eat kind of teaches them that, hey, here's this important resource, here's this food, I want it, but if I'm patient, I will get it. It's here for me, it's not an emergency. It kind of brings that intensity level down a notch. It calms them down. It lets them just relax and not be so reactive to exactly what's going on in front of them. And just a really nice skill to have in your back pocket with your dog anyway. So the most important thing with all of these techniques is that you start early with your puppy. You're very consistent with it. You do it at least once a week, preferably more, and you continue to work on these skills through adulthood, because training with your dog is just like any other skill or habit. You need to continue to work on it or it's going to devolve. And of course, a lot of this is based on doing this stuff when your Akita is a puppy, so they don't have a resource guarding problem when they get older. However, I know you're sitting there thinking, Tony, my dog already has this problem. What do I do? Well, to be perfectly honest, I think all of these techniques can be used with a dog successfully that already has some resource guarding issues. It just might take a little bit more time, and you might need to be a little more sensitive about it, particularly when you are taking food away or putting hands on your dog that already has a resource guarding problem. That could be a recipe for disaster. That could be a little bit dangerous depending on how defensive your Akita might get. So I would start with the other two techniques first, and then maybe work on that one where you're interrupting your dog's feeding. Of course, also with these tips, they can be applied to not just food, but also water and toys, so keep that in mind. At the end of the day, if you try some of this stuff, and I mean really try, don't just do it once and say, oh, it didn't work. Give it a couple weeks, doing it consistently, maybe once a day or at least 3 or 4 times a week. And if it's not working, don't be afraid to call a professional. We all call professionals for different things. When we have something wrong with our car, we bring it to a mechanic. If we have a legal issue, we call a lawyer. There's no shame in getting some outside help from a behaviorist, from a professional dog trainer, especially because they can help you just lay the foundation and then you can carry on from there. The question is, what makes a good dog trainer? That is a topic for another day, so make sure to hit that subscribe button because we are going to be interviewing a local dog trainer here who is world-class in my opinion, and we're going to be going over things to look for in a good dog trainer, how to pick out the best dog trainer for you, and I'm really excited to bring that video to you guys. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have any other tips that you found that really worked for your Akita's resource guarding, post in the comments below. I'd love to know. We use the 3 tips that I mentioned in this video with a lot of success with Haga, but of course there's always more methods to be used, so always interested in hearing about that stuff, and we will see you guys in the next video.